I was standing outside my daughter's elementary school when my phone buzzed. I smiled automatically, expecting another message asking what we wanted for dinner. Instead, I read, "I'm moving to Italy with Olivia. I moved our money into my personal account. Good luck paying the bills." For a second, the entire parking lot seemed to go silent. Children laughed behind me. Teachers waved goodbye to parents. Someone honked in the pickup line. None of it registered. My husband of 12 years had just ended our marriage in 4 sentences. Then another message appeared. "Don't bother calling. My flight leaves in an hour." I looked toward the school entrance just as my 8-year-old daughter, Lily, ran through the doors with her backpack bouncing behind her. "Mom." She threw her arms around me. "Did Dad text you? He said he had a surprise today." I swallowed, everything threatening to show on my face. "Yeah," I said softly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "He texted me." I looked back down at my phone. Ethan was waiting for a reaction. He wanted panic. He wanted begging. He wanted to believe I had no choice but to chase after him. Instead, I typed 5 words. "Thanks for letting me know." I pressed send, locked my phone, and took Lily's hand. "Ready to go home?" She nodded happily, completely unaware that our lives had just changed forever. As we walked toward the car, my phone vibrated again. I didn't even look. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting to Ethan. I was following a plan he didn't know existed. Instead of driving toward our neighborhood, I turned in the opposite direction. Lily looked up from the back seat. "Aren't we going home?" "We'll get there," I said with a reassuring smile. "We just have one stop first." 20 minutes later, I parked outside a quiet office building. Lily stayed in the children's waiting area with a receptionist while I stepped into a private conference room. I made one brief phone call. "He sent the text," I said. The person on the other end didn't sound surprised. "Did he confirm he moved the funds?" "Yes." "Good. Nothing more, nothing less." I thanked them and ended the call. Driving home afterward, I finally opened Ethan's unread messages. There were pictures from the airport, a selfie with Olivia, a champagne glass held high. The caption read, "Finally free." I didn't respond. When we arrived home, Lily skipped inside while I stood in the driveway for a moment, staring at the front door. Everything looked exactly the same. The flower pots I planted in spring. The porch swing Ethan insisted we'd use every evening. The house we'd built together, except none of it felt the same anymore. Inside, I tucked Lily into the living room with her favorite cartoon before quietly walking into my home office. I opened a locked drawer. Inside sat a neatly organized folder containing printed bank statements, screenshots, emails, and handwritten notes dating back several months. I rested my hand on it for a moment, but didn't open it. Not yet. My phone rang. The caller ID displayed a number I already recognized. I answered immediately. "Hello." A calm voice spoke only one sentence. "He's officially boarded the flight." The line went silent. I hung up the phone and slipped it back into my pocket just as Lily wandered into my office. "Mom." I quickly closed the drawer. "Yeah, sweetheart." She hugged her stuffed rabbit against her chest. "Is Dad working late again?" The question landed harder than Ethan's text had. I forced a smile. "Why don't you help me make pancakes for dinner?" Her face lit up. "Pancakes for dinner?" "Absolutely." She laughed and ran toward the kitchen. I waited until she disappeared before quietly exhaling. Tonight wasn't the night to explain that her father hadn't just worked late. He had left the country. After Lily went to bed, I walked through the house. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then I opened our bedroom closet. Half the clothes were gone. His expensive watches gone. His passport drawer empty. Even the framed photo from our honeymoon in Hawaii had disappeared. He hadn't left impulsively. He'd been planning this for weeks, maybe months. I opened the filing cabinet in the study. Several folders were missing. Business contracts, tax records, personal documents. Only my files remained untouched. He hadn't wanted memories. He'd wanted evidence. I sat at the kitchen table and logged into our joint banking account. The balance loaded. I stared at the screen. Nearly everything was gone. Checking, savings, emergency fund, college account, transferred, one transaction after another. The remaining balance wouldn't even cover next month's mortgage payment. Most people would have panicked. Instead, I quietly printed the statement, then another and another. Every transfer was now documented. As the printer hummed, memories I had tried to ignore resurfaced. Whenever I asked about our finances, Ethan always smiled like I was a child asking adult questions. "I've got it handled." When I wanted online access to one of his business accounts, he laughed. "You just worry over numbers. You don't understand." If I asked why money moved between companies so often, he'd kiss my forehead. "Leave the money to me." I wanted to believe him. Keeping the peace always seemed easier than another argument. Then Olivia entered the picture. At first, she was just the marketing consultant. Then she was working late. Then she was suddenly attending every conference Ethan attended. Whenever I mentioned how often her name came up, Ethan acted offended. "You seriously think I'd risk our marriage over an employee?" Eventually, I stopped asking, not because I believed him, because I realized he wanted me to stop looking. About 6 months earlier, one small detail had broken that pattern. I had been organizing paperwork for our annual taxes when I noticed 2 wire transfers. Same amount, same day, different company names. One payment left. Another identical payment returned from somewhere else. It made no accounting sense. I mentioned it casually over dinner. Ethan's fork stopped halfway to his mouth, only for a second. Then he smiled. "Accounting error, but it's already fixed." He changed the subject immediately. I never brought it up again. Not to him. Instead, I quietly scheduled a meeting with someone who understood financial records far better than I ever could. I carried copies of statements, emails, and transaction histories into that office. I didn't accuse Ethan of anything. I simply asked one question. "Can you tell me if this looks normal?" The answer I received changed everything. From that day forward, I copied every unusual transaction, saved every email, backed up every financial statement, and waited. Not for revenge, for certainty. My phone rang just after 10 that night. The screen displayed my attorney's name. I answered immediately. "I've been expecting your call." There was a brief pause. Then she asked quietly, "Has he transferred the money yet?" My answer was only one word. "Yes." Silence filled the line. Then she replied, "Good." That's exactly what we needed. By the time Ethan's plane touched down in Rome, he had already reinvented his life online. His first post appeared before he even cleared the airport. A selfie with Olivia in front of a large window overlooking the runway. New country, new beginning. An hour later came another. They were laughing over espresso at a cafe near the Spanish Steps. Then another photo outside a luxury hotel. The comments poured in. "About time you chose happiness. You two look amazing together. So proud of you for starting over." Some people who knew us personally joined in. I guess the marriage had been over for a long time. "Hope Tracy lets you move on peacefully." One comment stung more than the others. "I always thought she depended on him too much." I stared at the screen for a few seconds. Then I closed the app. There was no point defending myself to people who only knew one side of the story. Lily walked into the room carrying a drawing she'd made. Look. She had drawn 3 people holding hands. Me, her father. I smiled anyway. "It's beautiful." She pointed at the 3rd figure. "Can we send it to Dad?" I gently folded the paper. "Maybe later." She accepted the answer without asking why. That hurt more than the online comments ever could. The next morning, an email from Ethan arrived. The subject line read, "Let's make this easy." I opened it. "I've already spoken with an attorney here. I'll have divorce papers sent over. Don't make this difficult. You'll save yourself money if you cooperate." At the bottom was one final sentence. "You have no leverage." I read it twice. Then I forwarded it to my attorney without adding a single word. Minutes later, she replied. Received nothing else. She didn't need to say anything. Across the Atlantic, Ethan was celebrating. He and Olivia checked into a luxury hotel overlooking the city. "You actually did it," Olivia said, raising a glass. "We're finally free." His phone buzzed. He ignored it. Then again and again. Finally he looked. His business partner Mark. 5 missed calls. Another partner. 3 missed calls. His office manager. 7 missed calls. Olivia frowned. Everything okay? Probably a client emergency. He called Mark back. The phone rang once before the call was rejected. That's strange. He tried another partner. Straight to voicemail. A third. No answer. Before he could think about it, a notification appeared from one of the company's largest commercial clients. They had publicly announced they were suspending all business with Ethan's firm pending a financial review. His smile disappeared. What happened? Olivia asked. I don't know. He refreshed the page. Another notification. One of his investors had posted a short statement. We have become aware of financial questions requiring immediate attention. Further comment will follow. Olivia leaned closer. What financial questions? Ethan laughed awkwardly. Corporate politics. You sure? Positive. But his voice wasn't nearly as confident as before. Back home, my phone began ringing too. Not congratulations. Questions. One mutual friend called. Did Ethan really leave? Yes. With Olivia? Yes. I'm so sorry. Another friend admitted she had seen his posts. I didn't know what to believe. You don't have to choose sides. I answered calmly. The truth will sort itself out. Even as I said the words, I wondered how long that would take. Late that evening, Ethan finally stopped looking at social media and opened his banking app. His expression changed instantly. Instead of his available balance, a large notification filled the screen. Account restricted. Certain transactions are temporarily unavailable. He frowned and refreshed the page. The message remained. He tried transferring money. Error. He attempted another account. Error. Olivia looked over his shoulder. Ethan, I'll call the bank. He dialed customer service. After verifying his identity, the representative placed him on hold. Several long minutes passed. Finally, she returned. I'm sorry, sir. Your account has been placed under restriction. We're unable to discuss further details by phone. What do you mean you can't discuss it? I'm unable to provide additional information. There has to be a mistake. I'm sorry, sir. The line disconnected. For the first time since boarding the flight, Ethan looked genuinely afraid. Ethan stared at his phone as if the screen itself had betrayed him. No. He refreshed the banking app again. The same warning appeared. Account restricted. He tried another account, then another. Nothing. Olivia watched him from across the hotel room. Maybe it's your internet. It isn't the internet. He opened his credit card app. Everything looked normal until he tried paying for room service. The payment failed. He frowned. Try it again, Olivia suggested. He did. Declined. Use another card. Declined. A third. Declined. The waiter stood politely at the door, pretending not to notice. I'm sorry, sir. Ethan forced a smile. We'll sort this out. The waiter nodded and quietly left with the untouched tray. The room fell silent. This isn't normal, Olivia said. It's probably fraud protection on every account. I travel internationally all the time. Then why are they all blocked? He didn't answer. Instead, he called customer service again. Another representative verified his identity. I'm trying to understand why every payment is being declined. I'm sorry, Mr. Bennett. I've already heard that. The restriction remains active. Who authorized it? I don't have access to that information. I need my money. I'm unable to assist further. The call ended. Ethan slammed his phone onto the bed. This is ridiculous. Olivia crossed her arms. Are you sure you told me everything? He looked at her sharply. What does that mean? You said you sold part of your business. I did. You said your divorce was basically finished. It is. You also said there weren't any financial problems. There aren't. She stared at him. Then why does it feel like everyone except me knows something? For the first time since they'd landed in Rome, Ethan didn't have an answer. Thousands of miles away. I walked into my attorney's office carrying the same organized folder that had been sitting in my desk drawer. She smiled gently. Perfect timing. Inside the conference room were 2 investigators and a forensic accountant. No one looked surprised to see me. One investigator slid a recorder onto the table. We appreciate your cooperation, Mrs. Bennet. I just want to answer your questions honestly. For the next hour, I carefully explained exactly what I had observed over the previous several months. Nothing more, nothing less. I noticed transfers between companies that didn't match normal accounting patterns. When was that? About 6 months ago. What did you do? I asked Ethan, and he called them accounting errors. The investigator nodded. What happened next? I consulted professionals. I explained that I had met with both my attorney and an independent accountant because something didn't feel right. They advised me not to confront Ethan again until the transactions could be properly evaluated. So I quietly protected my own paycheck by depositing my salary into a separate account that belonged solely to me. I never touched Ethan's business accounts. I never moved his money. I simply preserved documents that already existed. Bank statements, emails, wire confirmations, tax records. Every unusual transaction was copied and stored exactly as I found it. The forensic accountant smiled slightly. Your records have been extremely helpful. One investigator opened a file. Mr. Bennet made one critical mistake. I looked at him. When he transferred nearly everything into his personal account before leaving the country, he unknowingly consolidated funds we were already tracing. So he actually made your job easier. He nodded. Much easier. Instead of following dozens of complicated transfers across multiple accounts, investigators now had one primary destination, one account, one owner, one complete trail. The investigator closed the file. People who panic often simplify complicated investigations without realizing it. I finally understood why my attorney had asked one question the night Ethan left. Has he transferred the money yet? She hadn't been hoping he would escape. She had been waiting for him to make the mistake they anticipated. When the meeting ended, I walked outside into the afternoon sunshine. For the first time in months, my shoulders didn't feel quite as heavy. My phone rang. It was the investigator. I forgot one thing, he said. Yes. There was a brief pause before he spoke. They found him. The call ended. I stood completely still, knowing that Ethan's dream of disappearing had officially come to an end. I didn't celebrate when I heard the words. They found him. I simply thanked the investigator, ended the call, and sat in my car for a long moment. For nearly 6 months, I had lived with questions I couldn't answer. Was I imagining the strange transactions? Was Ethan hiding debt? Or was something much bigger happening? Now I finally knew I hadn't been paranoid. I had been paying attention. Months earlier, everything had started with a single wire transfer that didn't make sense. As a project accountant, I wasn't involved in Ethan's business, but numbers have a way of telling stories if you're willing to read them. The same amount appeared twice. Money moved between companies with no clear business purpose. Invoices didn't match payment dates. When I asked Ethan about it over dinner, he barely looked up from his plate. Accounting error. Then he smiled. You're worrying over nothing. That answer should have reassured me. Instead, it convinced me something wasn't right. Rather than accusing him, I quietly scheduled a consultation with a financial attorney and an independent accountant. I laid every document I had collected across a conference table. I don't know if any of this means anything, I admitted. I just want someone else to look. After nearly an hour of reviewing the paperwork, the accountant leaned back. I can't tell you a crime has occurred, he said carefully. But I can tell you these transactions deserve closer attention. My attorney nodded. From this point forward, protect yourself. That advice changed everything. I opened an individual account for my salary. I stopped depositing my paycheck into our joint account. I downloaded monthly statements before Ethan could alter or delete them. Whenever I noticed another unusual transfer, I quietly saved a copy. I never entered his business accounts. I never interfered with his work. I simply preserved information that already existed. Over the following months, investigators contacted me after receiving information from another source connected to Ethan's company. They never asked me to trap him. They never asked me to provoke him. They only asked me to continue documenting anything unusual if I happened to see it. So I did. I went to work, packed Lily's lunches, helped with homework, attended soccer games, and acted exactly as I always had. Ethan mistook my calm for weakness. He believed I still trusted him. He believed I would never question him. Most importantly, he believed he had all the time in the world. Then he sent that text. "I'm moving to Italy with Olivia. I moved our money into my personal account." Those words weren't just cruel. They explained exactly what investigators had hoped to learn. He had voluntarily gathered nearly everything into one account under his own name. Instead of making the money disappear, he made the financial trail dramatically easier to follow. When his plane landed in Rome, financial institutions had already received the necessary legal instructions. The restrictions weren't triggered because he boarded an airplane. They were triggered because his own transfer had completed. Within days, more consequences followed. His company's largest clients terminated their contracts. Several investors publicly withdrew their support. Business partners who had ignored investigators suddenly became cooperative once they realized the financial records pointed directly toward Ethan. Civil lawsuits quickly followed. Then came the divorce proceedings. This time Ethan wanted to negotiate. His attorney requested mediation. Mine agreed. When Ethan finally appeared by video conference from Italy, he looked nothing like the confident man smiling in those airport selfies. His expensive confidence had been replaced by exhaustion. "Tracy," he began, "we can work something out." I looked directly into the camera. "I wanted to work things out before you left." His eyes dropped. "I made mistakes. You abandoned your daughter by text." He didn't answer. "You emptied our accounts." Silence. "You expected me to pay every bill while you started a new life." Still nothing. The mediator eventually spoke. "Let's focus on resolving the remaining issues." And we did. Ethan's own text message became one of the strongest pieces of evidence in the custody case. It showed deliberate abandonment. It showed financial control. It showed intent. Combined with the bank records and his sudden departure, it painted a picture that was difficult to dispute. The court awarded me primary physical custody of Lily. Ethan received parenting time under structured conditions that required him to rebuild trust over time. Financially, I wasn't ruined the way he had planned because I had followed my attorney's advice months earlier. My salary and personal savings remained protected. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. Enough to keep our home. Enough to pay our bills. Enough to give Lily stability. The first few months weren't easy. Lily cried some nights. She asked why Dad had moved so far away. I never lied. I also never spoke badly about him. I simply told her the truth she could understand. "Dad made some choices, sweetheart. Does he still love me?" "I believe he does." "Then why did he leave?" That question had no simple answer. So I hugged her and said the only honest thing I could. "Sometimes adults make decisions that hurt the people they love." She nodded quietly. Children often understand more than we expect. Almost a year later, Lily and I finally took the vacation we had postponed for years. Ironically, we went to Italy, not because Ethan was there, not because we wanted answers, because it had always been Lily's dream to see Rome. We walked through the Colosseum, tossed coins into the Trevi Fountain, shared gelato while sitting on the Spanish Steps. No secrets, no arguments, no checking my phone every few minutes to see what kind of mood Ethan was in. Just peace. One evening, as the sun disappeared behind the old buildings, Lily slipped her hand into mine. "This is my favorite trip ever." I smiled. "Mine too." She looked up at me. "Are we going to be okay?" I squeezed her hand. "We already are." As we continued walking through the streets Ethan once imagined would become the beginning of his perfect new life, I realized something. The text message he sent to destroy my future had actually freed me from the life I had been surviving. He thought boarding that flight meant escaping responsibility. Instead, it became the moment every decision he had hidden finally caught up with him. And for Lily and me, it became the first day of a future built on honesty instead of fear.